make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up $500,000 in soybeans, and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show.
Show me the money!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on.
I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness.
Your money, your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome, everybody, to the Peter Schiff Show podcast. I am on the road. This is part of my summer 2025 podcast tour. I am now in Montecito, California, which is part of Santa Barbara. For those of you who may not be familiar with the area, it is very beautiful out here. I just arrived the other day from Las Vegas, where I was a speaker at the Bitcoin 2025 conference. I will be talking about my experience at that podcast on the other side of the commercial break. And basically, most of today's podcast, I think I will talk about my experience at the Bitcoin conference. But before I get there, let me talk a little bit about the markets, what's going on. You know, we're in a brand new month now. This is the month of June. And when the month of May started, I thought maybe investors would sell in May and go away. But they did not do that. They not only did not sell, stock market investors bought. We had one of the best Mays probably ever. I mean, I haven't had a chance to research it, but the numbers are pretty big. The Dow was up about 5.5% on the month. S&P 500 up 8% on the month. These are big moves for a month. The NASDAQ up 11.5% in the month of May. Even the Russell 2000, which had been battered pretty badly, was up 7% during the month. Bitcoin rose 11%, almost exactly the amount of the NASDAQ. And, you know, a lot of people have been trying to claim that Bitcoin is decoupled from the NASDAQ. It's not a risk asset anymore. It's trading more like gold. Well, all of those calls are premature. Gold was down about 0.5% on the month. So how could anybody say that Bitcoin is now correlated with gold and not the NASDAQ when it pretty much traded in lockstep with the NASDAQ on the month, and it traded nothing like gold? The interesting thing, though, about gold is that while gold was flat to slightly lower, the gold stocks managed to rise. The GDX was up 4.5% on the month, and the GDXJ, the juniors, was up 7.5%. That's not bad, given flat to lower gold prices. And in fact, in the final week of the year, last several days, we had gold down about $30 one day, $40 another day. And on both of those days, the gold stocks were positive. And so a lot of the gains on the month happened in the final week of the month, despite the fact that gold was down. And I've been saying that this was going to happen, that we'd have to see gold stocks going up, even if the price of gold went sideways or down, because gold is already so high and these stocks are so cheap. They're not even priced for $2,000 gold, let alone $3,300 gold. And that's about where gold is now. In fact, it's up about $32 already early on a Sunday evening. We're at $33.22 on gold. And, you know, while we did have a big rise in the stock market on the month, we did not have a rise in the bond market at all. Yields on the U.S. Treasury bonds are near their highs, meaning bond yields near their lows. Right now, the yield on the 10-year is 4.42, and the yield on the 30-year is 4.96. So not much off the highs in the yields, not much off the lows in bond prices. And we barely had a rally at all in the dollar. The U.S. dollar right now against the euro is 113.75, so just below 114. The absolute low in the dollar euro, or high in the euro, was 115. And the dollar index right now is about 99.99. We barely got above or below 0.98. So the dollar didn't rebound. Bonds didn't rebound. The only thing that rebounded was the stock market. And I don't think that rebound is justified. I think the tariffs coming off the table, at least the draconian reciprocal tariffs, the 145% tariffs on China, I think there was a huge relief rally in stocks that it wasn't as bad as investors thought. But I don't think they ever really priced in how bad it would be anyway. So I think the market should have gone down more than it did, given how overpriced it already was before the trade war started. And so I think this bounce should not be long-lived. I think we should roll over, especially if we get continued weakness in the bond market and in the foreign currency markets, the dollar. But a couple of things that happened over the weekend that should bode, ill for the stock market. Right now, stock market futures are not down that much on the news. Dow futures off about 0.3%, 128 points. NASDAQ futures down about 0.4. One of the things that helped the NASDAQ last week was the better than expected NVIDIA earnings. So that was a big deal. And also, there was a Supreme Court ruling, not Supreme Court, a court ruling, lower court, trade court, that, kind of threw out some of Trump's tariffs, saying that these are not legal, that the president doesn't have the authority to unilaterally impose these tariffs. And I agree with that court. Although I think the Trump administration has got another ruling that the tariffs can stay until it's resolved by a higher court. And again, it wasn't all of the tariffs that were thrown out. But again, I think the president is abusing his authority. The reciprocal tariffs are not really reciprocal because he's not imposing tariffs that match tariffs that are imposed by our trading partners. There is nothing reciprocal about them. He just called them reciprocal because of the authority to level reciprocal tariffs. But you can't redefine reciprocity and just impose whatever tariffs you want and claim that you've got the authority. And also the emergency, Trump has said that, well, we're imposing tariffs as an emergency. The emergency is fentanyl. Maybe it's an emergency, maybe it's not. I mean, I understand that, there's a huge risk. A lot of people are dying of fentanyl. But it's clear that that's not why the tariffs are there. When Trump campaigned on tariffs, he didn't campaign on tariffs because of fentanyl. And when he had Liberation Day, he didn't say that he was liberating us from fentanyl. The purpose of the tariffs, and even the ones on Mexico and Canada and China, are predominantly to bring American manufacturing home and to raise revenue. Trump talks about that all the time. So you can't say, no, revenue is not the reason. Bringing back our manufacturing is not the reason. It's all about fentanyl. That's just an excuse to try to justify tariffs that he has no authority to impose. I mean, if it really was all about fentanyl, he wouldn't be talking about these other issues. But obviously, and the courts should not turn a blind eye to what is obvious, the purpose of the tariffs is revenue and bringing back manufacturing. If there's an added benefit of maybe reducing some fentanyl imports, that does not mean that that is why they are there. And Trump should not be able to use that to get around the law. The Constitution requires Congress to levy taxes, and more specifically, the House of Representatives. All revenue bills, including revenues from tariffs, must originate in the House. And that's because the founding fathers didn't want one man in the White House imposing taxes on the American public. And that's where the tariffs fall. They are on Americans. They are not on the Chinese. They're not on the Mexicans. They're not on the Canadians. That was just a bunch of BS so that people would vote for Trump, believing that Trump was going to fund government from external revenue, not internal revenue, and that we were going to be off the hook, that Americans were going to get tax cuts and we were going to pay for government by taxing China and everybody else, and that was just not true. But that court loss for Trump was taken as a win for the markets, because the stock market obviously does not like the tariffs, and so that anything that diminishes those tariffs would be helpful to the stock market. Now, over the weekend, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that apparently the Chinese are cheating. They're not living up to their end of the bargain. I'm not even sure what the bargain is, because they really didn't negotiate much. They both reduced the tariffs that they had imposed. Trump imposed them, went up to 145, and then China went up to 125 in retaliation. And then after they met in Geneva, Trump came down to 30, and China came down to 10 or something like that. And that was about it. I'm not really sure what else they agreed on, but apparently the Chinese aren't living up to their end of the bargain. And now it's no more Mr. Nice Guy. So we'll see, because now Trump is basically saying maybe we're going to have more tariffs. And in his post on Truth Social, Trump said the only reason that he lowered tariffs was to help out China. Right? He said the Chinese economy was devastated by the tariffs and that there was going to be civil unrest. And he didn't want that to happen. He felt bad for China because there was so much hardship as a result of the tariffs that he felt sorry for the Chinese. And so he decided to be a nice guy and just, go easy on them, right? As if it had nothing to do with the U.S. stock market tanking or all these forecasts for recession, because, there was no ships coming in from China with products. No, had nothing to do with our economy. He was solely motivated by the goodness of his heart because he felt bad for the Chinese and wanted to let them off the hook. But now he's saying, no more Mr. Nice Guy. I'm going to be tough now on China, which of course, it's not tough on China. It's tough on Americans. The Americans pay the tariffs, not the Chinese. The Americans are going to have to do without the products, not the Chinese. There's plenty of products there in China. In fact, if China exports fewer products to America, that means there's more products in China for the Chinese to buy. So it's actually good for China. Whatever they don't sell to us, they get to keep for themselves, right? So that's a good thing. Or maybe they can sell to somebody else that actually has stuff that they need. But this is a negative development that potentially could be weighing on the stock market on Monday. The other potential negative development is the weekend meeting at the White House. Donald Trump summoned Jerome Powell to the White House, basically, trying to get his mind right by taking him back behind the woodshed and basically telling him that he wants lower rates. I mean, that was the whole purpose of the meeting. Trump wanted to talk to Powell because Trump has been beating up Powell in public, calling him, too late Powell, and, making fun of him. He doesn't know what he's doing. And I guess he wanted to state his case. I don't know how much arm twisting there was, but it's no secret that Trump wants rate cuts and Powell is not delivering. Now, as far as I know, Trump did not accomplish anything because Powell has made it clear that it doesn't matter what Trump says. It's his call, and he's not going to be intimidated, that the Fed is independent, and he cares about maintaining the independence of the Fed, and that it would be very damaging to the Fed's credibility if he were to just cave and do what the president wants, not what he thinks is right. But there are rumors now that Powell may resign tomorrow on Monday. I don't know if there's some kind of press conference that's been called. So that's a rumor that's out there. I don't know if there's any truth to that rumor. I would be surprised if it were true. I mean, it doesn't seem like it would be like Powell to resign. But also, I don't know how much that's going to accomplish because, number one, if Powell steps down, immediately his position is filled by the vice chair. Now, I don't know if he's leaving the FOMC completely or just resigning as chair, and he would just be another voting member. My guess would be if he resigns as chair, he's probably going to leave the FOMC entirely. But the vice chair would take his place. Now, if you look at the meetings, there's 12 voting members. So even if Powell left and now they'd have to get another voting member. I'm not sure if a new one has to be appointed or what the procedure is. But even if it went down to 11, it's not like the last meeting was a close call. There was no dissent. All 12 members, I believe, voted to keep interest rates unchanged. So even if the vice chairman were to become chairman, rates would still not move. Now, Trump has to appoint somebody else. And whoever he appoints needs to be, confirmed by the Senate. Now, assuming the Senate just rubber stamps whatever lackey Trump wants to, put in Powell's place, he's still only one vote. Yes, traditionally, the Fed chairman carries a lot of weight. But if the other FOMC members have been honest and they really think that rate cuts would be inappropriate, and especially if they're concerned about Trump bringing in a ringer and how that might impact the credibility of the Fed, they may still vote to leave interest rates unchanged. So it won't matter. It's one man, one vote. It's not like the Fed chairman has, extra votes. In fact, he doesn't even cast a tie-breaking vote. So if there's a tie, which would be 6-6, nothing happens. So you have to get a majority to change policy. And so I think it would be a hollow victory for Trump to replace Powell. All it would do is damage the credibility of the Fed. Even if the rest of the members hung tight, it would still look bad for Powell to step down and for Trump to reappoint somebody. But again, if he does, it's not going to matter. So it would be much better for Trump, right, if that's really what his agenda is, to just allow Powell to serve out the remainder of his term and then, appoint somebody. That won't look as bad. Plus, I think from a political standpoint, it actually helps Powell and Trump to have the foil, because if the economy gets worse, which it will, Trump can blame it on the Fed. He doesn't have to accept responsibility. He doesn't have to say, look, it's my tariffs or it's the big increase in the budget from the big, beautiful bill. He can say everything would have been great if Powell had just done the right thing. And I told him what to do because I know more about interest rates than anybody else, especially too late Powell. I told the guy to cut rates. He didn't do it. And that's why the economy went south, right? That's why we're in a recession. It's got nothing to do with me, right? Because I was undermined by the Federal Reserve. Anyway, we got a quick commercial break. We're coming right back, so stick around. Have you ever been stuck waiting in line because the register froze up, your card kept declining for no reason, or the store only took cash, so you had to sprint to an ATM? When a store payment system is down, everyone loses. That's why Square is a total game changer. The moment you tap your card or pull out your phone for Apple Pay or Google Pay, the payment flies through, even if the Wi-Fi is down. And here in Puerto Rico, it sometimes feels like Wi-Fi is always down. That's what's great about local businesses here that have switched to Square for their payments, like Mundo Natural, a vitamin and supplement shop here in San Juan that uses Square for payments. Their checkout is always quick and smooth. Square isn't a one-trick pony. It scales with you. Its point-of-sale system isn't just easy to use. It gives you real-time sales tracking, inventory management, and customer insights in one dashboard, so you know exactly what's working and where to invest your time. And if you're ready to take your business online, Square's tools let you launch a fully featured web store in minutes. No fluff, just flexibility and control you need to grow. With Square's sleek hardware, intuitive software, and support for every major payment method, checkout is lightning fast and the staff can focus on what matters: great service.
Square keeps up so you don't have to slow down. Get everything you need to run and grow your business without any long-term commitments. And why wait? Right now, you can get up to $200 off hardware at square.com/go/Peter. That's square, SQUARE.com/GO/Peter. Run your business smarter with Square. Get started today.
All right. Well, my next stop is going to be in Palm Springs, California, although I am going to go down to the LA area before I head out there. But that's my next conference, the Freedom Fest. I have not been at Freedom Fest in a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. I used to go every year. In fact, I went to the very first one that Mark Skousen had, and I went to a lot of them back then. But I've been missing for a few years, but I'm going to be at this one. We're going to have a booth. I got a couple of reps that are going to be there. My family will be there once again. I mean, many of you had an opportunity to meet my wife at the Bitcoin conference. She was there with my kids, although they weren't really hanging out at the conference. I'll probably be hanging out at the conference more this time. By the way, I mentioned on my last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, my wife has a new video out from her new song, Love on Fire. A number of you have watched it, but she's got a great video that she composed. Remember, she wrote the song, she sings the song, she did the video. You can check it out on her YouTube channel, Laughing Cats. We'll probably drop another link in the description here, and you could watch her new video. But she will be with me at Freedom Fest, so I would encourage people to sign up to join me in Palm Springs. It's California, June 11th through the 14th. So it's coming up. But some people living here could probably get there on a last minute. And then later in the month, I'm doing the Real Estate Guys Summit at Sea, June 20th to the 29th. I mentioned on, I don't know if it was my last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, that I'm going to be flying directly to Miami from San Francisco. And I invited anybody from the Bay Area who is signed up for this conference to fly with us on our plane. And one of my clients from the Bay Area signed up, so he and his wife will be accompanying my family on our flight from San Francisco to Miami on June 19th. There's 2 more spots. There was 3, and in fact, 2 of the cabins sold, but now somebody canceled. So they're now at 2 cabins still. So if anybody wants to go, look, definitely sign up. It'll be a great time. In fact, my wife will be singing. She always performs on these cruises, so not the Laughing Cats, but there's a band that she sings with, so she'll be entertaining on the cruise. But it's a great educational experience, especially if you're into income-producing real estate. There are a lot of good speakers that'll be participating in the entirety of the 1-week cruise, along with my family and I. So if you want to sign up, and if you happen to be in the Bay Area and you need a lift, we still have some seats on the plane on June 19th, flying to Miami. You're on your own for your return trip because we are not going back to the West Coast. I'm going back up to Connecticut from the summit. Oh, I don't know what that was. Anyway, I want to talk before I get to the Bitcoin conference. Oh, and you can sign up for Summit at Sea. It's investorsummitatSea.com. You just go and register if you want to attend that event. Again, June 20th to the 29th. The boat leaves from Miami, Florida. So I was watching Meet the Press this morning. I watch a few of these Sunday shows, but I want to talk a little bit about the Meet the Press, because on that one you had House Speaker Mike Johnson was talking about the big beautiful bill and just kept lying through his teeth about that bill. I mean, first of all, he also lied about how great the economy was under Trump. He repeated the lie that during Trump's first couple of years in office, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world. And he went out of his way to say it wasn't just the greatest economy in the history of the America. It was the greatest economy in the history of the world. So there was never a point in time in all of world history where any economy did as well as the U.S. did during Trump's first couple of years, which is so ridiculous to make those grandiose claims. But they keep doing that. But, then he went to talk about specifically about the big, beautiful bill. And one of the things he said about the big, beautiful bill was that it did not increase the national debt, which, of course, it does. I mean, it increases it a lot. And then he said it reduces the debt, which it does not, right? It doesn't reduce anything. We would have a smaller debt if this bill didn't pass. If Congress did nothing and just allowed the spending to continue unchanged and allowed the tax cuts to expire, we would have smaller deficits. I mean, we would still have deficits. The national debt would still be going up every year. It's not like it would go down. But because of this bill, the deficits will be bigger than what otherwise would have been the case without the bill. So how can you claim that this bill reduces the debt, doesn't increase the debt? And then he said that it was the largest step ever taken by Congress to kind of change the course that we're on, the fiscal course of the country. That this is just a first step in the right direction. He said, like, we're turning a battleship, right? So we can't just turn it on a dime, but we have to start slowly. And he claimed that the big, beautiful bill was this great start, right? And it's the most historic thing, and this is fantastic, when it doesn't do anything. We're not changing course. We are staying on the exact same course that we've been on. In fact, not only does the big, beautiful bill not change the course or alter it in any way, it actually accelerates the speed with which we're traveling down this course. So we are headed on a course to a fiscal disaster, and we're not veering from that course. We're staying on that course. We're just stepping on the gas so that we get to the fiscal disaster sooner than we would otherwise get there, right, if we did not have this bill. And what really bothered me, too, about this whole interview is then the host, because first she was right to question him, on the bill and the fact that it makes the deficits worse. And, she brought up the Congressional Budget Office estimates. And then, of course, Speaker Johnson said, oh, who cares about those estimates? They're no good. And meanwhile, she pointed out that when Biden was president, he used those same estimates to say that his deficit was smoke and mirrors, and that look at the Congressional Budget Office. And then he had to say, well, sometimes they get it right and sometimes they get it wrong. In other words, when a Republican is president, they get it wrong. But when a Democrat is president, for some reason, they get it right. But the most frustrating part of it was when they started talking about the Medicaid cuts. And she started going off on him for these big cuts to Medicaid. And he started to justify, well, they're not really cuts. They're just, work requirements. We just want to make sure that able-bodied men, work at least 20 hours a week, either as a job or community service before they get their benefits. So, I mean, we're not really cutting the benefits because we're just requiring work, but, we're not letting people just do nothing, able-bodied. And meanwhile, knowing that none of these requirements even kick in for 5 years. So they're arguing about these cuts that don't even really exist. But of course, the Democrats love to talk about the cuts as if they did exist because they want to accuse the Republicans of cutting Medicaid, which they're not even doing. Because even the little bit that Mike Johnson is talking about that they have the courage to do doesn't actually happen for 5 more years because they don't have the courage to do it. They're only pretending they have the courage, because if they had the courage, they would implement this work requirement right now. They wouldn't wait 5 years for it to kick in, knowing that it'll never kick in because it's going to get changed before it happens. But meanwhile, they're taking the heat anyway. They're getting blamed for these non-existent cuts. But meanwhile, we have an increase in military spending in this budget. more than what would have been spent, increase in money for the wall, and in fact, the extra defense spending in this bill exceeds all the Doge cuts. So whatever we gained through Doge, we blew it by just handing the money to the Defense Department, right? So we're cranking up that spending all at a time when we have a fiscal time bomb ticking, right? So, and again, that's what I said from the very beginning. There was a lot of false optimism that we were going to get our fiscal house in order, that we were going to have all this cuts to government spending. None of that is going to happen. And all of that is going to weigh heavily on the markets over time. You know, gold, it was up $32 when I started this podcast. Now it's only up about $18, so losing some of that. But the stock market is now selling off more. The Dow off 180 points, and the NASDAQ now down better than 0.5%. The dollar is weakening now across the board. It's weaker than it was earlier. Let me check out the bond market. I wonder if rates are rising right now. They look like they have ticked up a bit on the yields. I would expect them to move up more. But the horrible fiscal situation that is playing out is going to be a big problem. It was a lot of false optimism, and now there's going to be a lot of disappointment among our creditors, and it's going to show up in the bond market, in the foreign exchange markets, and in the precious metals markets. Anyway, let me talk about my experience at the Bitcoin conference. You know, I got a lot of flack, mainly from some of the Bitcoiners online, about going there. Like, why is Peter Schiff going to a Bitcoin conference? I don't like Bitcoin. All right, well, do you have to like Bitcoin to go to a Bitcoin conference? I mean, can't you be a Bitcoin bear? I mean, you know, is the Bitcoin conference just supposed to be an echo chamber? Is it just supposed to be a place where everybody, you know, just parties and talks how great Bitcoin is and how high it's going to go? Or do you want to have some serious discussions? Do you want to have some contrarian points of view? Not that there was a lot of contrarian voices there. I was probably the only one. Frankly, there should have been more. It would have been more of an interesting conference if there were more people that were questioning, what everybody else was saying, all this bullishness. But I was, very impressed with the conference itself and how well it was organized and how everything seemed to go on time, especially considering how big it was. I mean, the conferences I typically go to, like the Freedom Fest, which is actually one of the bigger ones, that'll have a couple of thousand people. But or the Money Show conferences, I go to a couple of thousand. Now, when I go to the New Orleans Gold Conference, maybe 600-700 people. So I'm used to going to small conferences. This was 35,000 people, enormous investment conference. Yet, they really ran this thing very well. A crazy amount of exhibitors there. So many different companies were exhibiting, and the booths were pretty high quality, high tech, expensive booths. I'm there. I got like a $1,200 booth. I don't spend a lot of money on my booth, but a lot of these exhibitors got money to burn now in the crypto space. And one of the big things going on now in Bitcoin are the Bitcoin Treasury companies, because the guy that runs, Bitcoin Magazine also just launched his own Bitcoin Treasury company. I think it's called Nakamoto, but there's a few more. Donald Trump basically just turned a DJT Media into a Bitcoin Treasury company. They're going to be selling $3 billion worth of stock. They just made this announcement last week. $3 billion of stock to buy $3 billion worth of crypto. $2.5 billion is going to be for Bitcoin, which of course, you're basically taking what amounts to a Ponzi and you're pyramiding it. I mean, what's the purpose of having a company whose sole business model is to go out and buy Bitcoin? I mean, Bitcoin doesn't do anything anyway, but anybody who wants to buy Bitcoin can just go buy it. I don't need to buy stock in a company that does exactly what I could do without the company. But everybody wants to borrow a page from the MicroStrategy playbook because they're making a fortune. So people are trying to tap in to the lunacy, the insanity of Bitcoin with these Bitcoin treasury companies, but which further proves that Bitcoin can't be used as a currency, because when it's just bought up by a bunch of companies who hoard it and do nothing with it, it's obviously not in circulation. It's not being used as a medium of exchange. It's not being used to make payments. It's just being used to speculate. Companies are buying it, hoping the price goes up. But, I thought one of the most interesting things, though, I thought about my experience there, I expected at least somebody to say something negative to me. I didn't hear one negative word from a single person. And I was mobbed with people from the moment I got there to the moment I left. When I was at my booth, there was a huge crowd around my booth. Everywhere I walked in the casinos, people are coming up to me. Can I take a photograph with you? I've probably never posed for more selfies at any conference. And obviously, because there's 35,000 people there. But these are all Bitcoiners. These aren't like gold bugs. These are Bitcoiners. Most of them, dyed in the wool Bitcoin maxis. And, they just want to have a picture with me. And what everybody was telling me, almost to a person, was that I was the reason that they bought Bitcoin. And they credit me for, even though that was not my intention. And I didn't want people to buy Bitcoin. In fact, I told people not to buy Bitcoin, but they bought it anyway. But the reason people were telling me they bought Bitcoin was because I taught them about economics. They learned economics from me. They learned about sound money. They began to question the Fed. They were worried about the debt. And so I put them on this path that ultimately led them to Bitcoin. And in fact, when I talked to David Bailey, who runs the conference, who is the one that invited me because he lives in Puerto Rico, and that's where I live. But I said, David, I told him this story, and he said, yeah, Peter, I know. You're the reason I bought Bitcoin. The same thing. He credits me for his decision to buy Bitcoin. So I probably was responsible for more people owning Bitcoin at that conference than any one single individual. So when people were saying, why am I at the conference? I started it inadvertently. It wasn't my intention. It's kind of like a government program. It was an unintended consequence. And some of the people said that they initially started buying gold because of me, but then they went from gold to Bitcoin, probably because they were frustrated that gold wasn't going anywhere and Bitcoin was. But that's what happened. And then, of course, there's the other phenomenon where people just buy Bitcoin every time I tell them that it's topped or stop buying it. In fact, I know that there's programs out there that are tied to my posts on X where you sign up, and every time I post about Bitcoin, it automatically buys you Bitcoin in your account. So not only am I responsible for a lot of people buying Bitcoin in the first place, I'm responsible for people buying more. But anyway, so that probably made me a lot more relevant than people realize. Oh, I don't know. It looked like my camera was freezing for a second. But anyway, I also wanted to talk about the Michael Saylor talk, at least the one I saw. I mean, he talked quite a bit. I was only there once, right? I'm on a debate, right, for half an hour. This guy, Trace Meyer, who is pro-Bitcoin, and then there's me. Now we had a moderator, right, Natalie Burnell, who is pro-Bitcoin too. So it really wasn't like a unbiased moderator. It was like me against these other two, right? So it's me on the one side and the other two on the other side. And one of them is pretending to be a moderator. But we only had a half hour to discuss this. And if anybody wants to see it, it's up on the internet. You just go on YouTube and Peter Schiff Bitcoin conference, or I think they put it up there. The Bitcoin magazine put it up there as a Bitcoin debate for the ages, something like that is the title. And so you can watch the half hour. But the second to last talk of the event was Michael Saylor. And it was a packed room at the time that he spoke. Probably because Ross Albright, right, the Silk Road guy who was just pardoned by Trump, he had his first public appearance at the Bitcoin conference. And it's really the Bitcoin community that is the reason that Trump pardoned him, because that was one of the promises that Trump made and kept to get their votes, was to pardon Ross Albright. And by the way, he will also be a speaker at Freedom Fest. So he was the closing speaker. But right before he spoke, it was Michael Saylor. And this is standing room only. In fact, I was sitting on the floor. I couldn't even get a seat. I came in and, I was standing for a while, but eventually I sat down. And so Saylor, has his 21 tickets to wealth or something like that. There was 21 because everything is 21 because there's 21 million Bitcoin, right? So there's always 21 is always the magic number when it comes to Michael Saylor. But his entire speech boiled down to bet everything on Bitcoin. He basically said that no other assets matter. He said that you should sell your stocks, sell your real estate, sell your gold. If you own a business, you should sell that, right? If you're a doctor, if you're a dentist, I think is what he said, sell your practice or at least part of your practice and buy Bitcoin, borrow money, put it all on Bitcoin, and you're guaranteed to win. You can't lose, right? Is basically what he's saying. So bet the farm on basically nothing, and you can't lose. It is the most recklessly irresponsible, self-serving advice anyone could give, right? Obviously, Michael Saylor has over 40 billion worth of Bitcoin that he has already bought. He's buying hundreds of millions, sometimes over $1 billion any given week. He's all levered up. He needs everybody else to buy Bitcoin. He's trying to get companies to buy Bitcoin. He was trying to get Meta to put a bunch of their cash. They told him to pound sand. I think they had a shareholder vote. They didn't even get 1% of the Meta shareholders who wanted to put their cash into Bitcoin. I know he tried to get Microsoft to put some of their cash into Bitcoin. They said no, right? The central banks don't want to put any of their cash into Bitcoin. They're buying gold, right? But his advice is reckless and irresponsible. But I thought it was funny, and I guess I could thank him, for mentioning me. But obviously, he was trying to make fun of me. But when he got to gold, because he said Bitcoin is designed to outperform everything, as if you can design something to outperform, right? Why wouldn't you, right? So anything then, I'm just going to design my company to outperform. It's not designed to outperform, right? But according to Michael Saylor, by design, Bitcoin beats everything, right? They just programmed it in there. Like, oh, well, hey, should we program it to underperform or outperform? Hey, let's make it outperform. Okay, good idea, right? And they programmed it. And so you can't lose, right? It's going to beat everything by design, right? That's how brilliant Satoshi was. He made it so that you always win if you own Bitcoin. And Bitcoin outperforms every other asset, even though it has no yield, pays no income. It's still, by design, you can't lose when you buy Bitcoin. But so when he got to gold and he said, Bitcoin is designed, it's going to beat gold. Then he said, sorry, Peter. Right? He knew he didn't have to say my last name. Everybody there knows he's talking about me. So he says, Bitcoin is going to beat everything. Sorry, Peter. And then he said, I got to repeat that. The only thing he said twice, Bitcoin is going to beat gold. Sorry, Peter. So he repeated that again, really just telling me that Bitcoin is going to beat gold. It's not going to beat gold. And, it's not going to be sorry, Peter. It's going to be sorry, Mike, and the investors in MicroStrategy. What nobody wants to talk about is that Bitcoin basically peaked out in November of 2021 in terms of gold. Bitcoin today at 105,000 with gold at 3,300. Bitcoin is about 10% lower than it was at its peak in 2021. Now, a lot of people say, hey, I'm cherry picking. No, I'm specifically picking a peak, an important peak in Bitcoin in 2021. And my point is that measured from that peak almost 4 years ago, Bitcoin is 10% lower. You can't ignore that. There is significance to the fact that Bitcoin's peak, or where Bitcoin is right now, is lower than where it peaked 4 years ago. And you got to think about all the stuff that has happened over the past 4 years. Massively bullish stuff, especially the election of Donald Trump. But before that, we had all of the Bitcoin ETFs that did not exist in November of 2021. So we have all these ETFs, and we have MicroStrategy's, 2121 plan, all the Bitcoin that MicroStrategy has bought, all the copycat Bitcoin reserve companies that already exists, all the new ones, the strategic Bitcoin reserve, and various states establishing their own strategic Bitcoin reserves, right? So you've had all of this bullish stuff, all of this government and Wall Street buying of Bitcoin. No gold, right? Wall Street's not buying gold. U.S. government, none of these states are coming up with strategic gold reserves, right? In fact, the gold ETFs are smaller today than they were 4 years ago. They've had net liquidations during that time period. Yet despite all the bullishness and all the buying, and me just being at a conference with 35,000 people, this is the biggest Bitcoin conference they've ever had, right? All this happened, and Bitcoin is lower than it was 4 years ago. So what does that tell you? Somebody is selling their Bitcoin, right? Somebody. And one of the main question I threw out at the audience at this conference, because the only thing that gives Bitcoin value is the belief that it's going to go up. I mean, that is the whole premise. They think everybody is going to buy it because it keeps going up. And the more it goes up, the more people are going to FOMO into it. They think that we have no choice, that if everybody just buys it, it's going to be the best performing asset, as long as nobody who's buying it sells it. And then all the naysayers are just going to capitulate and say, you know what? I got to get in on this. I can't not buy it. I want to pretend I'm rich too. You have all these other people who are buying something they can't sell, and they're pretending they're rich. And I need to pretend I'm rich too. I can't take it anymore. I can't watch all these people pretending to be rich and not be one of them, right? And the reason I'm saying pretending is because if they're not selling, they're not rich. Now, I know a lot of people are trying to now figure out how you can borrow against your Bitcoin. They want Bitcoin to be collateral for loans. Why is that? Because you're supposed to never sell your Bitcoin, because if you sell your Bitcoin, the pyramid collapses. So they want to make it so people can be rich on Bitcoin and enjoy their wealth without collapsing the pyramid and selling their Bitcoin. And so they're trying to let people borrow against their Bitcoin, which of course is a recipe for an even greater disaster, because that means the lenders are going to take a bath, because eventually this thing has to collapse. You can't just will a Ponzi or a pyramid to last indefinitely. And, when I talk to these guys at the conference and they say, look, only 5% of the world owns Bitcoin. That's a hell of a lot. They think that means the other 95% are going to buy it. You're never going to get 100% of the people. You're never going to get close. In fact, the crazy thing is 50% of the people who own Bitcoin are Americans. That should be shocking. The Americans are the ones that are dumb enough to fall for this thing. But it shows it's all about gambling. So what I told the audience is it's the greater fool, right? Bitcoin is not gold because it doesn't have any of the properties that gold has as a metal, right? Gold has real demand. If the price of gold goes down, jewelers will buy more because they need gold. Computer companies will buy more because they need gold in their circuits, right? There is a real demand for gold that increases as the price goes down. The lower the price of gold, the more demand from industry for gold. That's not true for Bitcoin. All the demand comes from speculators. And in fact, there's more demand when the price goes up. When Bitcoin is going up, more people want to buy it. When it's going down, people want to sell it because, again, it's all about momentum and hype. And so what I told the people at the Bitcoin conference was that, look, you're buying an asset that is based on the greater fool. You're buying something simply because you believe you'll be able to sell it to somebody else at a higher price. And the only reason that somebody else is buying it is because he has the same belief. He believes that he'll be able to sell it to somebody at a higher price who will be buying it with the same expectation. And so I said, eventually somebody is the bag holder. Eventually you run out of greater fools, and you're the greatest fool, and you're left holding the bag. And so I asked the people to look around at the conference, look around the room at the enormity of this event, and to ask themselves, am I early in Bitcoin or am I late? Because believe me, I mean, I've been to a lot of conferences and I've never seen anything like this. You know, I tried to draw the analogy to the mortgage bankers conference I went to in 2006 at the peak of the mortgage bubble, but it was nothing like this. I mean, that was maybe 3,000 people. This is 10 times as big. And there was a lot of optimism about housing and the mortgages, but there's even more optimism about Bitcoin, right? These Bitcoiners, and there's some good people there, obviously, right? They're Peter Schiff fans, right? They're good people, but they are delusional, right? And their belief in Bitcoin is irrational, but it's religious-like, it's cult-like, and I mentioned that, and I can sense that. And as I talk to people, you can't reason with them, you can't convince them that they're wrong, and they're so sure that they're right that they can't understand why I don't get it. So many people just don't even think I'm being honest. Come on, you must really like Bitcoin. How much Bitcoin do you have? You're just playing a game. But they can't even accept the fact that somebody like me, who understands economics the way I do, and now the way they do, understands money, doesn't like Bitcoin. It doesn't make any sense because they're so committed to this irrational belief. The cognitive dissonance is so great that they can't even accept the fact that I don't believe it too. So they think I'm lying. They think I'm secretly hodling all this Bitcoin. Some of them think I'm Satoshi, right? So, but you know, they're in for a rude awakening when the bottom drops out of this thing. And I know the fact that, you know, it has gone up and it's over 100,000, and I've been critical of it the whole way up. I've been critical about it fundamentally. I've never said that it couldn't go up because it's irrational anyway, right? I mean, as long as people are foolish enough to buy it and then not sell it, and then more fools want to buy it, the price is going to go up. And again, they're not all fools. There's some very, very smart people. I had a lot of intellectual conversations. There are a lot of smart people who own Bitcoin, right? In fact, I'd say that the people who own Bitcoin, on average, are smarter, intelligent-wise, right, IQ-wise, than the people that don't, right? I mean, you do have to have some sense of intelligence to even think through this whole thing. But then you just have to have this one gap where you miss the most important fact that you're buying nothing, right? And you're buying into a paradigm that can't possibly exist. But because it's gone up so much, it's screwed up people's minds. And that interferes with their logic. And I think that there's a lot of hope. I mean, the idea, and I wish I could get on board with it. And a lot of people say, oh, Peter, you're a Bitcoiner. And I might have to say, you know what? In my heart, I guess I am. But in my head, I'm not, right? So I can't think with my heart. I understand what they're hoping to achieve with Bitcoin. I just know that they can't achieve it because my heart won't go there. I mean, my head won't go there. It won't let my heart go there. But you have a lot of people whose emotions have overcome their reason. Anyway, that's it for now. Remember, I'm going to be, continuing to do these podcasts as I am traveling around during the summer. I'm not going to be back to Connecticut, I think, until the beginning of July. That's my plan, and I'm going to spend some time there before I am back in my regular podcast studio in Puerto Rico in August when my younger kids have to go back to school. By the way, I will be visiting my older son in San Francisco. He moved there. A lot of people ask me about him, because he, reached some type of, level of fame within the Bitcoin community because he liked Bitcoin. And a lot of people say, oh, you're criticizing it while your son is stacking all this Bitcoin. And I'm like, he doesn't have a big stack of Bitcoin. I don't think he really has any Bitcoin left. but a lot of the Bitcoiners have a soft spot for my older son. So I will be able to see him, but he is not, unfortunately, he's not going to be at Freedom Fest if you're going to be there. But my younger kids who live with me in Puerto Rico will be. Anyway, bye for now. If you like the podcast, don't forget to give me the thumbs up. Put a comment on there. If you'll notice, I do make a point of responding to some of the comments. Make sure and subscribe if you're listening to this on YouTube. I still don't have 600,000 subscribers. I don't know why I can't make it there. I'm close. I'm under 10,000, but it's been a very slow grind trying to get new YouTube subscribers. So if you're not a subscriber to my YouTube channel, you should subscribe, and you should encourage your friends to subscribe too. Bye for now.